Hello, Gridsters. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Cook, the Program Director for the Center for Operational Excellence. This lecture is summarizing the workshop that we had around fleet electrification. So the objective of the workshop was to bring in the multiple teams that have been resurrected within the utilities to support and drive electrification of fleet. So you had actually two separate teams. There was the utility fleet teams, which was managing the internal transition towards zero emission vehicles and modernizing their charging infrastructure. And then you had your customer engagement teams supporting the commercial fleet operations with the development and or utilization of advisory programs to enable interconnections for said customers. And then you also had a set of operations and planning leaders, the ones that are in charge of ensuring resiliency, understanding how to manage said load, and really the cross-department alignment that is required to scale electrification. A unique fact from the workshop itself was just the realization that most utilities have stood up these two separate groups, the utility fleet team separate from the customer engagement team, which ended up bringing to the table quite a great set of conversations around duplicity as well as understanding the varying differences. As is the goal of AEIC is really for utilities to come together to share best practices, guidelines, and really lessons learned. So the effort behind the Center for Operational Excellence is to create additional opportunities around critical actions that are occurring in present time to discuss. And as you can imagine, in 2025, the understanding of how to enable and unlock the grid for fleet electrification is paramount. The big challenges that were identified around electrifying at scale amid the common obstacle, which is infrastructure barriers, was a few others. There was capital pressure. So the idea that there is a cost and a varying and or unpredictable set of timelines to understand to drive varying initiatives. During the workshop, we identified multiple big challenges around electrifying at scale. The one that is talked about at most is the infrastructure barriers. However, there are other challenges that were discussed and also became known. So the first one is capital pressure. To do this work, it has a high cost, and to execute within this space based on the changing incentives, misunderstanding, or requiring alignment of capabilities, the timelines for which execution occurs is quite unpredictable. Fleet electrification's timelines are constrained by the grid bottlenecks, yes, project silos became apparent, and generally the cost uncertainty. Also, another challenge that was identified and unifiedly spoken of is fleet readiness. The operators lack experience and our expertise in the planning realm, siting, and overall rate design. So put that into perspective. When we say the challenge is fleet readiness, it's not only the technology of the actual trucks or medium-duty vehicles to be ready to be electrified, but also from the awareness and understanding of how to plan, how to site, and really what is the rate design that makes all of this effort work. I would say the summary is not that this work should not be done, but there should be an acknowledgement of how integrated all of the various work streams truly are. And definitely the silos, especially for fleet electrification, should be eliminated near conception of desiring to do so. And I think that shows up in the other challenge that was discussed is interconnection delays. So projects stall for months due to permitting issues and grid upgrades. So if you follow the trends of the various obstacles that each of these individual groups highlighted and shared, you can see the weaving of the varying data sets and issues that need to be understood and then move forward to complete. And I think as humans, we become very siloed and forward thinking in our particular space of expertise that we forget about the system within the systems that we work in, and we lose sight of what it means to critically think through these large initiatives when you have external pressures mandating and demanding. All of these barriers are preventable and or executable, but creating the alignment across these challenges is a must. A discovery, we can lead by example, and we can be supported by innovation. And there's something about the word innovation in the electric utility space. It became a buzzword probably 5 or 10 years ago, as if the utilities were not innovative. So I would love here in this educational curriculum, as well as if we ever meet in person, is define what you believe innovation to mean. Fundamentally, it means that you're actively thinking outside the box and challenging the status quo. And that could be something as simple as how you fill out your spreadsheet, all the way to how can we connect this charging fleet to a grid that has a bottleneck. All that to say is one of the common themes for the utilities that shared some of their practical use cases was their ability to embrace the effort and support of those that were driving the initiative that was opposite of status quo. So the leaders allowed the overhead and then giving the authoritative voice to that partnership to exist. So for instance, for internal fleet electrification, where the utilities are using their own, they then can test the technology and develop repeatable modes to then share with the customer enablement team. Seems very simple, but it was somewhat of an aha moment. So you work internally to become the expert to then ensure and enable the energy advisory role for the customer. There also was a space where the partnership and collaboration existed between the utility and a vendor ecosystem, where the ecosystem that was developing the solutions didn't have full insight to the practicality and the challenges that the utilities faced. So creating strong partnerships with that ecosystem where discussions around mobile and flexible charging, which seemed as a non-starter 5 years ago, became the actual answer. So having a way to partner with vendors to develop the solution together versus waiting for the vendor to come with the solution that's already pre-cooked. So bringing that into the fold of really change management and procurement processes, that we are in a space where the utility must be developing the solutions with the entities that are creating these new assets that the grid must integrate with. And then the other group that was leading, for instance, PG&E has a very robust fleet advisory resource engagement. They provide a series of processes that allow the customer to navigate all of these technical questions, and they have become that energy advisory support role that most day-to-day customers would love to have. So they took it upon themselves to develop that expertise so they are front and facing to embrace the customers, to connect and have this open dialogue to ensure that the bottlenecks could be understood. And then also, is there other means of discussion to allow the charging to maybe come on before the grid is prepared? Through flexible charging programs. You can see that having these conversations in silos is detrimental to the progress, but if you bring them all internally to discuss the full vision, these types of activities do become a reality. To summarize kind of the 5 pillars of fleet electrification strategy that was really pulled out from the discussion and really to evolve with the AEIC membership's voices is the first, really get behind the internal fleet electrification. So plan, deploy, and refine, the EVs within the utility space so you have that expertise understanding. And it's of utmost value because it's also now an asset that you're utilizing to enable this for your customers. And then you develop your customer fleet enablement. So develop out your advisory, education, and overall support for the customer facing. The other pillar is understanding charging. You can become the advisor and you can convert your fleet. All in all, the crux is how will you charge your vehicles? Being very diligent and forward focused on the idea around charging resiliency. So not only do you have the capacity and the infrastructure to charge, but you have the backup systems that create the reliability that we have come to rely on. So making that first and foremost. And then also exploring this space of mobile charging and how that can divert and or be synergistic to maybe grid constraints that are too large to unlock, but there are creative solutions around the backup mobile systems. The other big discussion point is, coming back to data, is can we be creative and innovative around load management? So this term load management, if you think about the historical purview of the electric utility space, is that we built and planned for a peak moment in time per year. And so the idea that we now have to create systems that no longer serve that peak, but that can be flexible, is very challenging in regards to embracing the amount of processes that would be disrupted by this just one alteration of thought, which means, can we, the utilities that are in charge of the planning, create programs or the capabilities internally to manage the load in real time? And what that means is send signals to individual consumption points, such as charging, at-home charging, homes, and play on a signal to say charge or not charge. Or you will be live during this time period, not 24/7, 365. That is novel and new and challenging to execute because of the amount of infrastructure that needs to be built to communicate to the point, extract the information, bring it into the operator's purview to make decisions. Also, that disrupts your overall forecast and how you plan the grid for that one moment of peak. If you can alter the consumption of when a consumer wants to use power. All that to say is to make charging rapidly available is having flexible load management programs becomes inevitable. And behind that is your rate design, your consumer incentives, behavioral responses of said customer, and it goes all the way back. It was a very rampant topic that showed exponential possibilities, and it could be in itself a full series, which it is. 2026, coming soon. And the last pillar is really the cross-cutting challenges. Being very aware that these tasks and the requests that are being mandated, incentivized, or implemented from top down truly requires a de-siloing of silos and incorporating the enormous amount of information from the equipment experts, from the program developments, from the rate designers, and then from the new subject matter experts around charging and mobile charging and the interaction of said vehicle to said grid. Once you have that strategy in place is paramount to the overall 5 pillars that I just spoke of. Through the workshop, just to name a few programs that shared some of their up and coming, top of the maturity curve, Xcel Energy, Salt River Project, PG&E have effectively executed on converting, or in a very rapid pace, embracing the conversion of their fleet. And there's a significant amount of lessons learned that they came to the workshop and shared, and we summarized in our reports. Like for instance, Xcel Energy has a very large fleet goal, which is 1,200 zero-emission vehicles by 2030, and they are actively pursuing it and making headway. Their site planning, it transitioned from this one-on-one charging to really an awareness that they must incorporate this flexible mobile capability. And so firsthand, we got to see those partner developed assets that they have incorporated into their overall plan. Another successful story is not only are they electrifying the medium voltage trucks, but the bucket trucks. With the partnership and collaborations of the vendors, trucking companies, they have effectively electrified even bucket trucks, which was, fascinating to see, and a realization that they are ready. They're on the supply chain line, ready to be purchased by utilities when they have their strategy aligned. And of course, the challenge that was really summarized from their experience is understanding this new set of equipment and the software issues behind, how to incorporate it and understand what it's doing to the grid and how it's incorporated with actual vehicle, making sure that the workforce embraced this transition, and doing the training was the challenge. Ironic. People being the difficult step, but how do you incorporate a whole change of process of they understand how to fuel, but now they have to understand how to charge, and right there is a dynamic change which disrupts, us as beings. Volvo shared their electrification of construction equipment. So it was just another use case to show that there is actual production with strategy to roll out not only heavy-duty trucks and medium-duty, but the actual large construction vehicles are now being electrified, and how that has been done is an enormous feat, and it just shows you that this industry is tenfolds ahead of the utilities that have embraced it, so it's kind of, interesting to watch. And then the other case study I just want to share is PG&E from the customer electrification side. They had a program target to incorporate 4,300 EVs by 2030 and almost 10,000 by 2045. And they deployed a depot strategy, so they standardized their designs and made everything scalable. So if you think about that, a big way to scale any type of equipment is to standardize. And so standardizing designs amongst a varying degree of vendors is a challenge, but that was at one of their original pillars to ensure that they can scale this program target. Another area they aggressively spend time with is in the load management realm, where they're automating some of this discharge and charging parameters at the edge and showing the capability and really the realization that this must be a part of the solution to enable the 10,000 EVs by 2045. And then lastly, something that they took into consideration, and I mentioned before, is the resiliency behind this infrastructure. So say if said charging infrastructure is no longer available, how do you validate and ensure that you have your emergency response plans in place, which was a whole lift in itself, as you can imagine. With that, I would like to summarize. There is and was a fruitful awareness that these challenges have the potential to be overcome, especially if the shared knowledge of each other was done. So just to list, the series of challenges was the long interconnection delays, the fleet operators' readiness gaps, behind the meter costs and the reality of that, the lack of flexible infrastructure. So becoming aware that the flexible load management space is a necessity. So therefore, the rapid pace for which to enable flexible interconnection became a challenge. Siloed organizational structures, and of course, really the hardware and the labor availability. And so the solutions that were discussed and kind of shared through the use case and the lessons learned that provided over the 2-day workshop was developing mobile and modular charging is very supportive to the overall goal. Launching utility-funded advisory programs, so that the utility is the advisor to the customer, as they are the ones that will be connecting to the utilities grid. Pilot flexible interconnection models to ensure the capability and flexibility of your customer base, and then ensure that that ties back to your cost of service and overall rate design. And then of course, lastly, my favorite, align your cross-functional planning teams amongst the customer enablement, the operation and planning group, and your fleet internal organization group. And with that, I want to end with just an encouragement that this is an ever-evolving space, and it is ample for you to engage your peers and really lean in and develop solutions together.